Hey everyone, how are you all doing? We're back for our, I guess our real first official live stream. Um, so I know we had one yesterday. It was really good. It was fun. No, it was myself, Sammy Vada. We did a reaction video to Wes Huff um, on his uh, podcast with Flagrant. But today, I wanted to spend some time and maybe jump into talking about the Mahabharata, right? Or first, let's talk mythology on the whole. Um, um, so this, first of all, this talking into the void is new to me. Just by myself. So if you guys are listening, jump on up, say hi, so that I know people are there. So when I'm talking about mythology, I think a lot of people misunderstand fundamentally what myth means in I would say world traditions, right? Whether you want to talk about Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Greeks, Romans, and even in some sense the Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions, they're very much very mythology based, right? I mean, and the question is, what does myth mean? And people want it to seem like it's unreal or it's not something that exists, but it's merely imagination, which, in some sense, some myths are. But I think the idea around mythology that's much, much deeper is that, yeah, it might be a product of imagination, might be a product of storytelling and narrative, but it's it is as real as the world around us because it is the stuff of our minds, right? When you eat a chocolate and you feel the taste of the sweetness, and you have the taste sweet, but you have a commotion or connection to it that will be real, right? The first memory you have of someone you love, that exists only in your mind. It doesn't exist in the world. Uh, is that real, not real? And I think that's where sometimes people struggle with this because we try to explain the things of our minds, the things that are true to us about us in our consciousness in a way uh, uh, that is connected to the tangible world around us. So I think one of the problems is we are talking about two different things and we're trying to make them one and the same. And which is where I think we have the understanding of what myth represents to us, what it feels to us, what it expresses to us, appears secondarily to as if it's less real than the world around us. And I think we have to disabuse ourselves of the notion because the world around us can change. The house will be gone. Your family members are gone. All that stuff is going to pass over time. But the myth might be enduring. It might stick around. Like the Ramayana says at the end. As long as the rivers and the trees, the mountains are there, the rivers flow. So shall this Ramayana be spoken by all people. I'll never leave the earth. So I wanted to take this time today, and hopefully I'll be joined by Sammy and then another friend today to discuss the Mahabharata and the text. So before I think let's just jump into it in some sense. What is I want to deal with the issues around the scholarly nature of the text first, right? There's two ways to think about the text. The text of the Mahabharata, which I have. So this is one of my favorite versions. I have the one by M.N. Dutt, which has in it the Sanskrit and the English, if you can see that. So you can actually if you know how to read the Sanskrit, you can read it there, and then check your I guess your translation or understanding with the text of with M.N. Dutt's translation. It's a good one. It's not you know. It's a relatively easy read. I think like there's also Vivek de Broy, um, his Mahabharata, which is fantastic, and we've had him on here before, and it was really fun. Um, but okay, so when you think about the Mahabharata, we have to first, before we get into the narrative of the text, I kind of want to address a couple of points around the the history of the text and what the text is and where it came and arises the various issues around it. So first and foremost, I think most scholars put the text roughly between the dates of 4th century BCE to 4th century CE, which is a pretty large gap of time. And that's just because their view is it had so much accretions over time. It took a long time to build out. And that's usually attested or agreed upon by people like no, even Wendy Doniger or who's John Brockington, Jerry Larson. There's a bunch of these scholars that's a position they take. Now the other position is by a smaller group of scholars, people like Alf Hillbeitel. I forget how to say his name. It's a German name, but and Madeline uh, Verdio, and she and a few other people who take that the Mahabharata was written actually in probably in a very short period of time, probably right before the end of the BC period, but right after the time of Ashoka or connecting to the time of Ashoka, based upon the fact that they think the text is in conversation with Ashoka. And Patrick Olivelli kind of agrees with this. But my position itself is I think the Mahabharata is older than that. And it's probably, Kevin McGrath, even who's a great scholar, will say maybe it's a Bronze Age text, which, I think that's fair. And I think with the Mahabharata, like, it is massive, right? It's 100,000 verses. And that's probably, and I don't think that's including the Kila, the Harivamsha that's attached to it, which is, another 12,000 or something like that. It's a massive text, right? It's the biggest text on the earth that I actually could be incorrect, but it's one of the biggest texts, if not the biggest. And it has the most impact across, all of Asia, frankly, going to Southeast Asia. And so the way to think about the history of the text is I don't think it matters as much to me that whether these events occurred or not. Now, the story, the text itself, like I said, is said to be around fourth century to BC to 4th century CE. I think it's closer to the 8th or 9th century BCE when it's written. But the events of the story reflect a time period. At least this is how scholars like B.B. Lal and a few of the people will say it reflects a time period that's connected to around 1200 BCE, which is in the Bronze Age, right? So, and the text, like for example, they found Dwarka, they found a part in Delhi where it was potentially in the Prasta. There's evidence of some of this stuff, like archaeological evidence, I think it's painted gray ware, things like that. People can correct me if you're listening. Yeah, so the historicity is potential, and I'm not saying that I don't think it's true. I am saying it doesn't matter as much to me. So what matters is his narrative, and we can jump into that kind of right now. So the Mahabharata is playing on multiple motifs, multiple levels of motifs. One of the highest levels is playing is, let's say, if you're interested in like Indo-European work, it's playing with Indo-European motifs, and it's playing with them in a very deliberate way. And so the Mahabharata has that element, which is, let's just put that in the historical sense. Now, okay, so here's a question. All right, I didn't know it came from X. Let's show that. All right, the pastoral lifestyle of Krishna and the lifestyle of Rig Veda people similar. What do you think about this aspect? Okay, so Krishna's lifestyle, yes, but he is pastoral, right? He belongs to the cowherd community. Nanda, his adopted father, and Yashoda, they're cowherds. They would travel, they'd move around with their cattle. So yeah, the Rig Veda also seems to have elements of clearly pastoral nature, but it's not only pastoral. So the Rig Veda also seems to provide evidence of cities, aspects of cities. Now, if you think about many of these poets that are writing the Rig Veda, there probably were some level of aesthetics that were maybe a bit separated from the kingdom, but they would come back and forth, which you find in texts like Mahabharata too, right? Like Vyasa has ashrama in off in the forest, but he comes comes and goes as he pleases. So hopefully that that question is answered. Okay. So when we talk about the story of Mahabharata, what we're discussing here would be okay. There's the Indo-European motifs. What I mean by that is, like Indra, the sky god, connected to the stories, like his stories as Indra come into the Mahabharata, but they're connected to the motifs that are brought in by, let's say, the Greeks and the Romans and the other Indo-European traditions, and you'll find parallels. So there's one level like that that you can explore, and there a lot of people do explore. For example, George Dumazel explores it in the idea of the five kings, right? The Pandavas connected to the tripartite function, right? He basically breaks down, like, for example, Bhima. I mean, like the Ashwins belong to a particular function. Arjuna and Yudhishthira are grouped together, and Bhima is grouped as a separate category. So that's a tripartite function as they approach it. So you could approach it in the European sense. You could also approach it in the sense of within our tradition, within the Mahabharata tradition, the Hindu tradition, the text itself is a reflection of the yajna. The yajna have, that we talk about in the Vedas, Pravargya yajna or Ashwamedha yajna or these various yajnas are playing out as the narrative, right? The very text itself says that the reading the Mahabharata itself is like a yajna. The engagement with Mahabharata itself is like a yajna. And the mythology, and even it says, even if you read one verse of the Mahabharata or you hear one verse of the Mahabharata, it itself is like a yajna. So it has efficacy for that, right? So there's a couple questions. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to get through this preliminary part. So when the Mahabharata is approached in that lens of being the meta myth that provides the link between all later myths or all later narratives that come, the Puranas, the other Itihasas, the Sthala Puranas, the stories we tell, and the Vedic Yajna, it becomes that link. It connects all the Vedic stuff to the stuff we do in our lives. So Mahabharata itself, my view is, if you lose everything else in Hinduism, like if you lose all the texts, the Vedas go, the Puranas somehow disappear, all these various Shastras go. If you have Mahabharata, you can reconstruct majority of both the Puranic tradition and the Vedic tradition. And also the Pancharatric, the Agama tradition, because that's very interesting too. Mahabharata possesses a good amount of agamic knowledge in there, and there's allusions to that, right? So when you think about, like, for example, if we take it back a second and say, like, the story of Indra, right? Indra in the Rig Veda kills Vritra, Shambhara, and Numuchi, right? These various Danavas, not really Asuras, but Danavas. But he has the help of people like who generally the Marutas, like Vishnu, for the most part. These two beings are there to help him in his battle with these Danavas. The Mahabharata flips some of this, right? The actor, in the sense that Arjuna is still like Indra, doing all the things. He is the new Indra on earth. So where Indra is heaven, Arjuna is on earth. Arjuna is doing the things Indra is doing. He's fighting. He's developing. Dealing with the Rakshasas, the Danavas, the kingship element of expansion, as you would say, or protection. He's doing that. Now, who does he have by his side? Who helps him? Who grounds him? Who gives him strength? His brother Bhima. Bhima is always present with him, right? Bhima, like, as the aspect of Vayu, is the Marutas represented there. And who else assists him on almost everything? Krishna. Krishna is Vishnu, right? So you see the Vedic motif of Vishnu's relationship with Indra playing out in the Mahabharata as Indra and Vishnu, Indra and Krishna again. And the text itself refers to both of them as Nara and Narayana, right? Like Nara represents the spirit of man, which Indra is always connected to man, right? Indra's always been connected to man from the time of Rig Veda. And Vishnu as Narayana, Krishna as Narayana represents the resting place, the situated spot where men find their final and ultimate destination and existence in. So there's Nara and Narayana, and these two elements, these two deities are called it's like a dvanda of the Vedic dvandas. There exists throughout the entire text, right? The stories talks about Nara and Narayana happening. They're sons of Dharma again, Yudhishthira, which is very interesting. These are the plays that are happening within the Mahabharata, where you see a character and their ancient Davic counterpart doing something, and then affects the world down below, right? So there's that really interesting intermixture playing out. So I guess we could. I mean, we have a couple questions. I kind of want to get into some of these stories, these ideas. Okay, so let's first start with Charvaka here. He says, "What is the view on Varna? Is it based on birth or one's own qualities according to the Gita?" So I mean, Varna is always a topic that comes up in these spaces. Let me bring up something, right? Yudhishthira's conversation. Yeah. So there's a couple points. First of all, Varna very rarely comes up in the Gita, right? I think it's brought up twice. The first time by Arjuna, his fear around the war. He's concerned that the war is going to kill all these men. Then what happens is the women will be fallen, and then they will marry other people from other communities, and there will suddenly be Varna Shankara, right? So, by the way, and this is where like it's interesting because the text itself is very clear that the Pandavas, the Kauravas, the entire Kshatriya class of that time are all mixed quote unquote varnas, right? Because the story goes in the Adi Parva, right? The first book that Parashurama in the prior Yuga had destroyed all the Kshatriya men. And so in response to keep the Kshatriya community alive, otherwise the world would have fallen into disarray, the Kshatriya women went and procreated with other Varnas, but they kept their children as Kshatriya. So now all the Kshatriyas are some mixed Varna, although they claim pure parenthood. And so it's funny that Arjuna later is concerned about that same issue, but he doesn't doesn't understand what's going on here. So in that sense, Arjuna and Krishna. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry. Hold on. Yeah. So Arjuna and Krishna, in that sense, oh man, now I forgot my train of thought on this. Okay. Oh yeah. So Arjuna, Krishna does not respond to Arjuna in any of those claims. So Arjuna is concerned about the breaking down of society, the idea of women intermarrying with other groups, and the rules of Varna breaking down. Krishna does not respond at all. In the 711 verses of the Gita, there's no response to Arjuna's concern around this. So for me, it seems like pretty clearly Krishna doesn't care about that particular issue. Now, the other place that Varna occurs is in the area of the guna karma vaibhaga, right? In where Krishna basically says, based upon your gunas and karmas, your varna is done. So that occurs in I forget the chapter, but I'll go look at that. But it doesn't. So some people will interpret guna karma. They interpret like karma to be birth. Other people will interpret guna to be birth. But you can take both those views. The more important actual engagement on this idea of of Varna as coming from let me put that question back up. its own qualities of birth is the conversation between Nahusha and Yudhishthira. So this occurs actually much earlier. I believe it occurs in the Vanaparva, right? So in that particular text, there's a conversation between Yudhishthira and Nahusha. So basically, what has happened is Yudhishthira or Nahusha is captures Bhima and holds him tight, right, and is about to strangle or crush him. And Nahusha is actually the Pandavas' ancestors, and we'll get into that. If you want me to explain that story, I can do that. So what happens is, so let's I will share this screen because I forget the exact chapter where it's at, but I'll share my screen right now, and I think this will help you guys see the the there you go. The story. Okay. Uh, there we have it. Do you guys see it? Is it shared? At the stage. There we are. Okay, there you go. So in this, if you see here, this is a conversation between Nahusha and Yudhishthira, right? Who is the question is asked by Nahusha to Yudhishthira, who is a Brahmana and what should be known? Yudhishthira's answer is in whom are seen truth, charity, forgiveness, good conduct, benevolence of the rights of his order, and mercy is a Brahmana. And that which should be known is the supreme Brahma, right? So now he's not saying right here, although he does say right to his order is a Brahmana, what he says later on, here's the question. Oh, king, if you recognize, the next question is Yudhishthira, true charity, forgiveness, benevolence, these are all for the four orders. On which authority is a matter of religion, which is true, even seen in the Shudra. And this is the response. Those characters that present in the Shudra do not exist in the Brahmana, nor do they are in a Brahmana exist in the Shudra. A Shudra is not a Shudra by birth alone, nor is a Brahmana by birth alone. In whom these qualities are seen as virtues of Brahmana, they are Brahmana. And those people that have the other qualities are seen as Shudra, right? Even though he's Brahman by birth. So the Mahabharata is very clear and engaged on these things, right? So when people tell you Varna this, Varna that, like, yeah, there's people will argue that it's all birth based. Well, I mean, clearly we're seeing it's not entirely, right? The Mahabharata is having a deep conversation on what that means, right? Is it birth? Is it guna, karma? I mean, those are important things. And yeah, I mean, does hopefully that answers your question on that particular part. Okay, let's see. What's the next one? Okay, we have here. What is the meaning of Varna term? Yeah, Varna can mean color. It can be type. It could be ray. Varna has different meanings depending on the context, right? And in the literature that it's used. So it can mean color of like, the color of things, or it can mean like a ray of light. Sometimes that word is used for a ray of light, or something that has a certain type of distinction, varna, or is used in that sense too. Okay. Oh, I have to enlarge the slide. The slide is too small. Well, let me add it back to the stage. And how do I enlarge it? Full screen layout. There you go. I mean, hopefully that works. Yeah. So you'll see it right there. Okay. All right. Then I'll give it for a couple seconds up there, and then we'll bring it down. All right. So what's the next question here? All right. Next one. Without the Advaitic understanding, how can people decode the Mahabharata? Understanding Advaita Vedanta is a key to unlock scriptures. Only Mahabharata may not give the correct Vedic understanding. Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't agree with you here. I don't think the Vedic understanding is the only understanding that one can have on the Mahabharata or any of the texts, right? I think. Let me back up. Okay. Yeah, I think this idea that you have to have this philosophy of the Siddhanta, whether it's Vishnu, Dvaita, to read these texts, I don't think so. I think they help in your practice or your understanding of certain concepts, like for example, like the Brahmanatman nature, those kind of things make sense. But I don't think you need to have that understanding when you read the Mahabharata. Like the Mahabharata has its own gravitas, its own like engagement with these ideas, right? So um, yeah, so I wouldn't agree with that. Okay, we have something else. Anyone else that has a question? Okay, all right, we'll keep going. Okay, so let's start with the story and kind of play it out. The Mahabharata has 18 books, starting with Adi Parva, ending in Svargarohana Parva. Um, and there's 18 of those books, right? So the majority of the books are the war books, which sit with Drona. Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Shalya, and then I guess Saupika Parvan. These are 5 books of the 18 that are connected to the war books. Although Udyoga Parva, you can also maybe do connected to the war, so it's 6 books. Um, and then following that, you have the Stri Parvan, and then you have Anushas and Shanti, and then a few other Mosala, and then a few other parvas. So the biggest are going to be your Anushas and Shanti parva of all the Mahabharata. The the most books are the war books, but the Shanti parva and Anushas parva, where you get the conversation between Bhishma and Yudhishthira, is very important. The so that's a rough like overview of the text in terms of the books. All right. The Adi Parva, the first book, is very, very big and interest, and it gives you the beginning of the story, but it spends a lot of time, right? Like so in this, you don't even get to the story of the Pandavas until nearly, in this book until like halfway through. The Pandavas come up once or twice, but the initial portion of the Adi Parva is really about the story of how it gets there, like how the story itself is told, right? The story Mahabharata starts off. So think of this as like they call it the frame narrative, but if you guys know what you've seen those Russian dolls, like there's a doll nested in another doll, nested in another doll, all the way down. So the Mahabharata starts similar like that. There's this outer shell, and that is a conversation between a character by the name of Ugrashava Shoti and Shaunaka, right? So, and Ugrashava has just come from the Sarpa Satra, or the snake sacrifice of Janamejaya, and he meets Shaunaka Rishi, and Shaunaka says, "Tell me what happened, and I want to understand." And so the words themselves are very interesting because Ugrashava, it can mean the one who speaks loudly. Ugra Shavana, right? It's the same word as Shruti, which is say, heard, or you can use it that sense. And then Shonaka is basically a dog. It means dog, right? So he's the dog of the Brigu clan, and they exist in this mythic realm of the Naimaishika Aranyaka, right? The word nimisha, right? Like seconds, there's nimishas. So this forest is called Naimeshika, which is a forest of seconds, right? Or moments. So the Mahabharata story is told between two people that are connected to dog-like things, where they're talking amongst each other in a forest of moments. So a story is told where Ugrashava is telling Shanaka, okay, Janamejaya did this fire sacrifice, and at that fire sacrifice, I heard the story from Vaishampayana telling Janamejaya the story. So then there's layers. So first, the layers. So between each layer, there's a bunch of different stories. And one of the stories is how the war started, right? And in a very brief synopsis, so there's multiple locations in the Adi Parva where the 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 author or the speaker gives a synopsis of the story to be told, right, about the Pandavas. So in this, they give a story of why the war occurs, because at the meta level, not at the human level, but at the meta level, the story occurs because Bhumi Devi, the Mother Earth, is being overrun and taken over and destroyed by Rakshasas or Dhanavas that have come and taken human form, and other human beings have destroyed her natural habitats, killing creatures, killing humans. There's just this reign of violence and terror and so on. So in that situation, the Bhumi Devi goes to Brahma the grandfather of all the Devatas, and asks for help. And so he goes to the Kshitasagara, or Vishnu's abode in Vaikuntha, and they pray on the shores of the ocean of milk. And in that, Vishnu says, "I will take form." Then he orders all the other devatas to take form on earth, and then they give in the section of the Adi Parva called Adi Avatarana Amsha Parva. It gives the entire avatars of all the gods and devatas as they come into the world and take on human existence. So that is a really cool. It gives you the prototypes, like it tells you like Yudhishthira is from Dharma, but also Vidura is from Dharma. Or okay, 1 second, everyone. Someone's messaging me. So Yudhishthira is from Dharma. Vidura is from Dharma. And then Bhima is Vayu. Indra is in Arjuna, Nakula Sahadeva, Ashwins. Drona is Brihaspati. Bhishma is the Vasu Dayus, the Prabhasa or Dayus Patur, in the Indo-European sense. Balarama is Shesha. You have Duryodhana being Kali, Shakuni being Dwapara. I think Dhritarashtra is connected to Bhaga. If I have to go back and look, I remember. So each of the various beings are connected to different devatas or asuras, and it's Abhimanyu. Like Abhimanyu is the son of Chandra. In at least his amsha is, I believe, I forget the name of Soma or Chandra's son, but he becomes Abhimanyu, and to send down his son, Soma promises that, or asks the promise that he'll come back to him quickly, which is why Abhimanyu is also killed very early. So as I'm doing this, let me jump on some questions. Okay, that's done. Let me do here. Okay. So Naveen says, he does think Upanishad philosophy is important. Well, I'm not saying it's not important. So Upanishads clearly have a role to play, even in the Mahabharata. I'm just saying, having a Siddhanta view, whether you're going to be Vishishta Dvaitin, Advaitin, Dvaitin, Shaiva Dvaita, whatever Beda, that's not necessary to read the Mahabharata or to understand it. Of course, I think the Upanishads are necessary because they give you the context of, when, Ham Vaishvanaro Vatra Pranina, when Krishna makes these claims, or, the text is talking about the nature of the Atman, Brahman, and things like that. Yeah, so I wouldn't disagree with the Upanishads part. I do disagree with the Siddhanta part. Okay, so now we have, I don't know the name, but it just says Max. Okay, I want to know your opinion on Shankara Maya concept, as if everything is Maya, what's the point of worshiping gods? And Shankara holds authority somewhat in our religion. Okay, it's a little off topic, but I will approach this. Okay, so I think the concept of Maya. So for example, in the Mahabharata, Krishna is called, Yogeshwara. He's also so in his yoga, his powers, they're called Maya. And Maya, generally in most of the texts, means not illusion. It means creative power. So even Mayasura, who is saved by Arjuna if running from the forest in Khandava Prastha, and that creates the end up creating Indraprastha for them. Maya, in that sense, he's creative, right? It's not he's creating palace of illusions. People call it that, but that's not what it really means. It's not a palace of illusions. It's a palace of creativity, because from his creativity, these things are happen. They're real. They're not illusory, right? In the sense of they go away at some point. So I think in Shankara's concepts, I think what Shankara is trying to do with this idea of Maya, because he needs to have a way to keep Brahman utterly untouched by the workings of the world, right? Because if Brahman is the cause, the sustainer, and the dissolution of the world, then the fluctuations of the world affect him, which then, based upon Shankara's definition of what Brahman is, or what truth or reality is, that which is not changing, he can't have that happen, right? So you then postulate this concept of Maya, where everything occurs in this realm of illusion. So it's no actual change; it's just appearance, right? Parinamavad. I mean, not Parinamavad, but uh, Vyavartavada. I mean, that's not the term they use, but like it's basically what it is. This concept that that occurs is merely apparent. It's not actual change. So there's no real change happening to Brahman. It just appears that way to the jivas that are not yet understanding their true nature as Brahman. So Brahman's not changing. Brahman's not moving. There's just Maya that's doing it all, and that ultimately itself is illusion. So what he's saying is as long as one is in the the realm of Maya, Vyavahara, you do have to worship the gods because the gods represent are more powerful in this Maya world. That is the dream state or that human beings and all beings go through. So yes, the worship is required to help you move through and navigate the world and eventually gain the knowledge to move out. So I think that's a way to think about that. All right, so now we get back to Mahabharata. So hopefully that answers your question, man. Naveen again. To understand the Mahabharata, because Itihasa and Purana are considered fifth Veda, and they are expansions of the Vedas, just like Chandi, Mahabharata, and Ramayana are also esoteric. Okay. I think that's your response to the Upanishads claim. Okay, I got it. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on that. I think that's a fair point. No, he wants to ask, what is my opinion of symbolic esoteric interpretations of the Itihasa? Ooh, I think those are all probably. I mean, it depends on how you're interpreting it, how you're viewing it. I think they're legit. They're good. Like for example, like I think even someone Nilakanta who does a commentary on the Mahabharata, he starts interpreting things metaphorically, esoterically, just as the Madhvacharya does also in his Mahabharata I think it's called, I forget. Yeah, the Mahabharata Tatnirpriya or something like that. And that's it's a he takes the same concept. He takes his Dvaita worldview and it gives us kind of a rough sketch of the Mahabharata in that Siddhanta. So you can do that with the Siddhantas, but you don't need it to read the text to understand the text. It's helpful for your tradition and your integration of the text into your tradition. Yeah. Okay, and you also some books, authentic books I have read on symbolism of Ityasa, Panahansa Yoga, and there's Gita commentary. Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are good. I mean, oh yeah, but like your next point, Adhyatma Ramayana, Tulsidasa's Ramayana, Manas, um, uh, uh, slips my mind, Ramacharita and even Ananda Ramayana. The Ananda Ramayana, Adhyatma Ramayana, and even parts of Tulsi are like, for example, esoteric. I mean, it's a weird word to say, but it's more spiritual or adhyatmic interpretation of the Ramayana, where the roles of the deities and the characters become much more internalized, and that happens in the Mahabharata too. So I don't think we need to say otherwise about that. Okay, so getting back to the story part, and yeah, thank you, Naveen. It is Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya. Yes, okay. Yeah, I totally forgot the name. It's slipped my mind. Okay, so the Mahabharata, going back to the story, is when it's going to Avatar and Padma, I just explained that. So Janamejaya is conducting the sacrifice because his father was killed by a snake called Daksha. And the reason is because Parikshit, who is Janamajaya's father, had offended a rishi, and that rishi's son, Shringi, cursed Parikshit while he was away to that, right? Cursed Parikshita to die within 7 days of that incident. And in that, Parikshita decides that he's going to try to, get ready for death, and he constructs, he wants to wait out the 7 days. He constructs like a pillar with high pillar where he sits up there and no one can get to him. And then there's some storytelling that occurs, and eventually Daksha gets up there, is able to bite him and kills him, and then he dies. And then the Janamejaya, in his anger, years later, by the way, years later, decides that he's going to do the Sarpa Satra and kill all the snakes. So all snakes. So when he starts the Sarpa Satra, the snakes are just flying in from all over the place. They're pulled in from all over the universe. The big ones, the strong ones, the ones that change form, the ones that are like can hold up the earth. They're all being pulled in to the sacrifice. Hundreds and billions of snakes are dying. So, but the funny part is the text itself. It's got these weird little quirks, right? A lot of people don't talk about how the snake sacrifice is stopped. So it's stopped by this rishi by the name of Astika, which is funny, right? So Astika comes. Astika is a son of a Naga and a Rishi that both have the same name, Jaratkuru, right? So this the snake, the Naga princess, and the Rishi have the same name, and the prophecy was that the fire sacrifice or the snake sacrifice will be stopped by the child of two people that have the same name, and so it happened. And so Astika stops it. He comes in and he praises the king and the rishis and all this stuff, and the king says, "I promise I'll give you a boon." And then so the rishis are like, "Wait, don't give him that boon yet because Daksha is coming." Because Daksha had ran away. Daksha had ran away to Indra to seek Indra's protection. So Indra had started protecting him, but then by the power of the mantras, it was ripping Daksha away. So Indra fled. And when Indra fled, Daksha starts coming towards the snake sacrifice. And then when the rishis see Daksha coming, and they're like, "Now you can give the boon." And then so what? So when Janamejaya gives him the boon, Astika says, "Stop the sacrifice." And so immediately, Janamejaya just stops. Daksha is left midair, and then he's sent off, and the sacrifice ends. So the Mahabharata arises because this is a sacrifice happening over many days. So while the sacrifice is occurring, Vyasa, the author of the Mahabharata, is there with his students. Vaishampayana, Soti. There's like three other ones. I forget the names. And who actually, because Vyasa had just separated the Vedas, and he had given each of the Vedas to each of his students, and then he gave one the Mahabharata to Vaishampayana. To memorize. So Vaishampayana then tells the Mahabharata in between the moments of the sacrifice. So, if you've been to a Vedic sacrifice, there's some of the sacrifice occurs, there's a break, and in those breaks in between, the story is told. And this is a story that Janamejaya is hearing and from Vaishampayana, and then that gets deeper expanded upon by Ugrashavasoti because the nature of the conversation. So just as Vaishampayana and Janamejaya are talking, Janamejaya will interrupt Vaishampayana in the story and say, "Hey, can you tell me more about this?" So then the story takes a digression. And in the outer layer, Ugrashavasoti has the same thing happening to him by Shonaka. Shonaka tells him, "Hey, can you tell me, you mentioned this thing in the story. Can you expand on that?" So there's like, at various levels when you read the text, you're jumping in and out of frames. So some parts of it, you're in the frame that goes even deeper than Vaishampayana talking to Janamejaya. You might go to then Vyasa telling a story to Yudhishthira, and then within that story, there's a story told by someone within that story, and then so you see this cascading effect where they start up here, open it up, comes down, and it goes up and down and up and down. It's pretty cool. So you just have to follow that. So, all right, good. Any questions or any thought comments or anything that you guys want to bring up right now? Okay, we have like 70 some people listening. It's not bad. Okay, and all right. So, what is the Mahabharata besides this storytelling, and why is when this storytelling occurs, the reason this storytelling occurs, I just explained, but Hey, Divine Nature, how are you, man? Um, uh, the story as it flows through is like a river, right? You're stepping into it, you're stepping out of it, and Vyasa does that regularly within the text itself. He's the author of the text, but he's also a character in the text. He moves in and out of the story as he pleases and when the time's necessary. So, like for example, when the war is about to start and Dhritarashtra, has Sanjaya with him, Vyasa comes and says, you know what? I'll give Sanjaya divine vision. He will relay the story because he was going to give it to Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra was like, no, I don't want it because I don't want to see the only thing with my eyes. I don't want to see uh, the the death and destruction that's going to occur. So the instead of giving to Dhritarashtra, he gives it to Sanjaya. Now Sanjaya, who is Dhritarashtra's like, is a sutta, right? So this is also important to know. Throughout the text, there's various suttas. Ugrashava Sauti, Vidura is a sutta, Karna is a sutta, right? These are bards, like bards, but charioteer. So Kevin McGrath has a great he addresses this, right? This idea of a charioteer, as he's taking the warrior around in the car, the chariot, he from time to time will stop and tell stories or to ramp the warrior up to fight, right? So the job of the charioteer is not only to move the chariot, but to be a confidant, advisor, and a hype man, so to speak, for the warrior. So Arjuna many times starts failing in his duties, and then Krishna has to hype him up. What does Krishna do? Jumps out of the chariot himself and says, "I will kill you, kill all these other people," forcing Arjuna to be like, "No, no, no, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it." So, or for example, when Arjuna is about to kill Karna, Arjuna is like, "I can't do this. This is Adharmic. He's on the ground here. He's off the chariot." And Krishna's like, "Well, what are you talking about? He was instrumental in the killing of your son. He tried to have your wife disrobed in front of people. He lied. He cheated. That is a dharma. You need to end it now." So he like hypes him up to do that. So this idea of a sutta or bard is very important in the text because they're storytellers. They're the ones that take the tradition of the Mahabharata and maintain it and keep it going. So Sanjaya, so now here's another narrative with the narrative, right? You have the narrative of the Ugrashava Soti, you have the narrative of Vaishampayana, you have the narrative now of Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya, and then in that narrative you have the Bhagavad Gita comes in, right? So now you're seeing 4 layers, and then the outermost layer is us, the story being told to us by a bard or a book or whatever. So there's like 5 layers playing out here, and that's the mythic beauty of that is like, so this is a feature of Indian storytelling that's found nowhere else, right? This idea that it's a frame within a frame within a frame within a frame, right? You've at least this far in, and the frames are acknowledged throughout the text. So it's really, really cool. And it's really interesting when you start looking at the text that way. So, hey, born eternal Lord Allah, peace and success to all. Late to the conversation here from Gnostic Informant. Gnostic Informant, shout out. He's awesome, cool. I love talking to the guy. We have really great conversations. We did a live stream on his channel a few days ago. It was awesome. Okay, so let's jump in. Which English translation would you recommend to someone who's unfamiliar with the Mahabharata? Yeah, that's a interesting question. It depends on, do you want to delve into the text or do you want to just like kind of get a cursory understanding, right? Because if you want to get a cursory understanding, there's a bunch of them. Penguin has, I think, published the Mahabharata. There is, what am I seeing here? I have to go look over here. I have a few Mahabharatas that are like abridged versions. But if you want the unabridged, I think the best out there right now is Vivek Du Bois. It's not cheap because the Mahabharata is huge, so people they're going to translate it or write about it are going to spend a lot of time writing about it. So Vivek Du Bois, I think it's like something like 10 books also, or 18 books, maybe it can be 18 books. No, I think it's 10. It probably costs like $200, frankly, to get all 10 of those books. Or there's online resources that I can't name that you can try out, and you'll find some. Um, so if you want separately, MJB SK Fanatic, hit me up and I'll drive. I will send you some links to that. I mean, to versions. Okay, one sec. Before Naveen will come back to you. So what do you say? Both, I guess. Let's say I have time and inclination, dive deeply, eventually Sanskrit too, but at least that's a decade down line. Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. Just message me and I'll help you out. Okay. Naveen, how does Bhagavata Purana build on Mahabharata with Vaishnava philosophy? Okay. So, I mean, so Bhagavatam itself is again downstream of the Mahabharata. Um, for example, what I mean by downstream is everything that happens in the Bhagavatam, although it's about the birth, the birth and young childhood of Krishna. That's not the only thing, but that's a central point. Um, the beginning of the Bhagavatam starts with Vyasa's kind of feeling down and depressed and like I've done all this stuff. I've compiled the Vedas. I've not compiled, yeah, compiled. He compiled the Vedas, divided them. I've written the Mahabharata. I've done so much stuff, but I just feel unfulfilled. Why? And Narada's response is because when you did the Mahabharata, you did not do the Bhakti Rasa, and so your full expression of the rasa, the emotion, needs to come out, and you should do that on Brahman, in this case Krishna. So he writes the Bhagavatam. Now and the Bhagavatam is for some traditions. By the way, this is very important for, let's say, I think the Madhvas have it, but they don't cite to it. By the way, in their I don't believe Madhvacharya cites to it all in any of his bhashyas, if I'm not mistaken. Um, part of that could be maybe the Bhagavatam that we have today did not exist at that time, and that's a scholarly conversation. But there's some Bhagavatam that did exist, but we don't know if it's what that Bhagavatam is, or at least we don't know with certainty. So Ramanuja doesn't cite to Bhagavatam at all. He cites primarily Vishnu Purana because Vishnu Purana, takes a position that's closer to Ramanuja's position than the other Puranas, especially on the nature of not only just Vishnu but the Vishishtadvaita philosophy. Now, with the Bhagavad, how does it build on the Mahabharata? I mean, it builds on the narratives of Mahabharata. It adds the flavor. So, for example, if you look at the Mahabharata, there's a kila at the end. The end of the Mahabharata, a kila, which means appendix, has Harivamsha, which is basically Krishna's story. So, throughout the Mahabharata, the proper Mahabharata, the main text, you don't learn much about Krishna. Krishna is kind of by many people seen as a charlatan, a power player, manipulator, and a lot of times he's just called names. Like go through Shishupala, right? He just calls them all these names, and like you're a cow herder, you lie, cheat, blah 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 blah. Very few people through the text know that Krishna is Vishnu, is Parabrahma himself, right? So or Narayana himself. So Krishna's kind of like this mysterious character that no one really fully understands except for a few people. Bhishma is one of those people, right? So what the Bhagavatam does is takes all these stories. So I mean, going back is so the stories of Krishna in his childhood are just referenced here and there in the Mahabharata. So, for example, like the name Keshava, is later described in the Harivamsha and also the Bhagavata Purana as because he killed Keshi, right? The demon Keshi, as one of the names. Or you'll find out where he's called Madhusudana, why he gets that name. So the text of the Mahabharata doesn't give you a lot about Krishna's exploits as a child or as before Kamsa or even somewhat after, but it really gives you more about his life after he meets the Pandavas in the Adiparva when they go to marry Draupadi. So that's when Krishna's life in the Mahabharata is really explained. But the Bhagavatam spends a lot of time on his birth, on the rasa around being a mother, the rasa of the gopis, his friends, his sakas, right, his gopas. So it is a text about, as a text says all the time, adbhutam, about wonder, right? So when you read the Bhagavatam, it's to fill you with love, fill you with wonder about the supreme. Whereas Mahabharata is not. I'm not saying it can't do that. Its focus isn't that. So yeah. Okay, let's see here. Abhishek Jha. What's my view on Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya? Take on authenticity. I guess I don't know what you mean. What do you mean by my the take on authenticity? Like, do I think that it's real, or do I think it's like? I guess I guess I'm not sure what you mean by authenticity. Do you want to respond to that? Like, I liked the Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya. It was really cool. Like from the Dvaita perspective, it offered a lot of um, understanding of how the Dvaita worldview approaches the text. So yeah, you tell me if you want to expand on that point about authenticity. I'll absolutely respond. Okay, what do we have here? All right, let's see if someone else has responded on Twitter here. So I'm making sure I get all the responses. Tut, 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 tut. Let me give me 1 second, guys. I didn't even share this on my stuff. Okay. I don't think there's any questions on Twitter. Okay. All right, let's go back here. All right. Do please a dedicated stream on symbolic. Okay, let me do this. Hold on. Please do dedicated symbolic interpretations. I mean, I'm all Gnostic Hinduism. I mean, I think Hinduism is all Gnostic. I mean, I don't know how how anything in the Hindu world is not Gnostic. Any story can be viewed and engaged with in a way that clearly exemplifies like gnosis or knowledge, right? Like the whole point of one of the whole points of Hindu thought is knowledge, right? Jnana, which is a cognate of gnosis. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So where did I leave off now? Unless there's another question here. I'm sorry. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Let's. What's the next question here? Or where did I leave off? I left off on. Remember where I left off? uh, I left off on. Oh, the story. Of the story within the story within the story. Yeah. So the Adiparva. I don't want to go through the entirety of the text because it's just so long. So if you guys maybe now I can open it up more to questions and comments. I mean, and whatever. I think Akil is going to join in a few minutes. No, Arnab, or I don't know, someone's joining space in a little bit. Sammy is also going to be joining relatively soon. Okay, Lord Ruku, let's see this. Do you think the traditional interpretations of different schools are actual exegesis or eisegesis? Interesting question. Okay, so a text can mean different things, right? Like if I say, let's use a simple statement of aham brahmasmi within the text, right? All the schools will say, actually, it's clear that it means, I am Brahma, but their interpretation would be like, what is I in this case, right? So their 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 engagement with the text become very linguistic, which is why Vedanta is heavily dependent upon a school of thought that came before called um, a school of thought that came before called Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, which is exegesis vis-a-vis. Here's Sammy. Exegesis vis-a-vis grammar, right? So to understand what the text is saying grammatically and how you can do that, and this is where it's like it gets difficult because there are different rules of grammar and different schools that apply it. Like for example, if your view is the most important thing in the sentence is a word, and that the word is primary, then the way you interpret the sentence is going to be very different than where if you were to think the sentence is the primary meaning function, and the sentence is the way you give definition to the words, right? It's a way of, like, for example, like, everyone loves to use I think the Chomsky used this, like, green dreams sleep furiously or something like that, right? So if you break it down word by word by word, then, like, it means nothing, right? But if you break it down by saying, oh, what I mean is, in this context, it means green dreams fiercely. You can say, well, the interpretive function here will say green dreams refers to, like, climate change or the Green Deal, and they sleep, meaning they're yet to awaken. They're dormant. The Green Revolution has not yet happened, but it's waiting on a sideline. So you can do that. You can do that kind of the functional interpretation. But again, it depends upon, like, what your linguistic basis is and your understanding is. What up, Sammy? Oh, you're muted, buddy.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, man. Good. Yeah, so we're just jumping onto some questions, and been going about an hour now. It's got, because I think I did some decent stuff on the Mahabharata. We can still go with it, but, like, yeah. So I'm just answering some questions here. So does that answer your question, Nikolaus, Lord Ruku? Because I think there's a good amount of exegesis, and there obviously is going to be some level of eisegesis going on. But I don't see it the same way that when I look at the Bible, or people interpret the Bible, at least most people that I find today, is it's almost all eisegesis. Like, you're bringing in the ideas of, for example, of, let's say, the Trinity is inherently found in the Old Testament. Well, I mean, and then you can go look for it, sure, but I don't think that same type of eisegesis is done in the Vedic tradition, or at least the Hindu tradition. It does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think when it comes to at least the Vedantic schools, it's less likely the case. Now, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's less likely occurring, just because of the nature of, they're so fixed on the grammar side. So they'll get arguments about the grammar, and then the grammar affects how you think about the sentence interpretation. Right. Exactly. Then, so his next question is, exactly then you do the historical critical exegesis, and you don't end up with anything Judaism or Christianity teaches. Now I'm exaggerating. Well, I mean, I think yes and no, right? This is where it's like, yeah, I think your exaggeration itself is not that much of an exaggeration, because everything is at some level, like, us building our own views into it, or like what we feel about something, right? Like, the text might say Jesus is merciful, but what does mercy mean to each person? And that's how they interpret it, like I guess, yeah. And yes, and your follow-up to this is exactly what the Vedic texts are meant to do. They're they're built with the multiple interpretation mechanism inherent, because the text itself, the Rig Veda, it's called the Samhita, right? It's called the bringing together of different viewpoints, traditions, ideas. So the text we have as Rig Veda is itself already a composite text, and it accepts that it's composite text. So, because if it's composite text, you're going to have different views. Now, the idea of each of the Vedantic schools, or the schools of, the Vedanta, is to now do hermeneutics to try to reconcile those differences. So what they're trying to say is, well, yeah, there's all these different rishis and different viewpoints, but they're kind of all saying the same thing, and here's how they're saying the same thing. Or they might be like, well, this is really, like, for example, Shankara's hermeneutics on this is, what he will say is, I accept that there's two stanzas in the Vedic Upanishads. In the Upanishads, there is the Veda position and the Veda position, which is that there's difference and there's non-difference. In my hermeneutics, the texts don't tell you this. In my hermeneutics, I'm going to take the Abeda position to be more supreme than the Veda position. So therefore, if there's a conflict between a Veda text and a Veda text, or a text talking about non-difference and difference, I will take the text on difference, non-difference, to be more more authoritative. So the structure gets built around that. You explain the different texts as being connected to Maya, Avidya, Vyavahara. So this is how like the engage. But Ramanuja's perspective is they're equal. How do I make these things make sense equally? And then there's the hermeneutics around that. You have a thought, Sammy?
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting. That actually made so much sense, and I think that specifically falls into like really principled ways in which you're describing the divine, like Advaita, Advaita, Beda, Abeda. I wanted to ask you in
Yeah.
that same vein. This is look, you have that's a very highly principled like understandings of the Vedic tradition, but for the layman, and in having in layman accessibility to these texts, you do have certain things you'll see in ways Hinduism, the Dharmic tradition is presented, which I'm not always convinced that this was a Vedic concept. And I do think that some of these are developed interpretations. One of them, for example,
Like, yeah. Go
the
ahead.
Trimurti,
Yeah.
Brahma representing creation, Vishnu preservation, Shiva destruction. Is that a Vedic? I don't know if that's a Vedic concept or more a Puranic development.
It's Puranic. It's not
Yeah,
in the Vedic, right? So it's like the so I mean the Mahabharata does refer to the Trimurtis as like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva in their respective functions, but then also like sees them as being Brahman themselves, and there's elements to that, right? So I think the idea. So by the way, this also plays out within the the Devi text, right, where it's like Saraswati, Lakshmi, Parvati all take on the same functions as
yeah,
Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, right? So this idea of Trimurti, I think, is it's not Vedic, it's not found in the Vedas, but it develops out of I think a lore and a tradition and other viewpoints around at that time.
right. I do think that there are more like physical concepts that the Vedas describe the universe to be, such that that cyclical rearranging of the universe through creation, preservation, destruction is there. It might not specifically ascribe Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, but I also
Yeah,
think that those deities, I mean, they play a very different role, each of them, right? Vishnu, Brahma, Prajapati, um, Shiva.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, like in the Vedas, how they're depicted in the Vedas are different than when you get the Puranic depiction, even parts of the Mahabharata depiction, because the mantra samhitas are just that mantras, right?
yeah,
They have sometimes like a lot of the Vedic tradition says we don't actually care what the meanings are. We just the sound is more important,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's one element. I mean, not everyone takes that position, but that's one of the positions.
Yeah,
So the
that's
stories are not fleshed out. I mean, like for example, the story of Indra and Vritra, the biggest story in the Rig Veda. It's not really
there
discussed.
after.
It plays out much bigger in the Brahmanas and then later the Mahabharata and stuff than it does in the Vedas. It's a pivotal moment, but it's not really like you don't learn about a lot about it.
So I want to ask you, why do you think that is? Why is that?
Why the story isn't
Why
fleshed
isn't
out?
Indra and Vritta, which is such a known story? I'll say this: when you look through the Puranic text,
Yeah.
you will know that the authors of the Puranas, Smriti, right? They know the Vedas in and out,
Oh yeah, yeah.
inside and out, which is crazy, knowing how big this corpus is, and crazy how long ago this text was. That it's the coherence is all there, which I think is an incredible feat. And so knowing that the why that battle isn't brought up um after the battle of Ritta, and it's not there in the Puranas, and it's a very very famous thing. And I don't know, maybe you don't have an answer to this, but I'm curious on why this doesn't really make an appearance after. I think it is mentioned here and there, and I think there are allusions to it in the Mahabharata. There's like maybe, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but some of the myths get conflated together, like Ritra, Vishwarupa. These are all explained in the Brahmanas and the Mahabharata of Indra's actions again. Now, like the churning of the ocean is such a big Puranic and Mahabharata based myth, it doesn't exist in the Vedas.
Yeah.
But it's there in the Puranic Itihasic text, and that's because the churning of the ocean also represents that the battle that's happening on Earth between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, right? Because they're on the Kaurava side is mostly Danavas or Rakshasas
Yeah.
that have inhabited mortal frames, and on the Pandava side it's mostly Devas, but there's some not Devas too. So it's this churning back and forth and this yagya that's playing out, right? So
Yeah.
it's it's interesting that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess in terms of, and the reason I bring this up is when you take your typical presentation of what Hinduism is, you have these, classic XYZ that exists on like some school syllabus, and Hinduism 101. But those
Yeah,
things, I don't necessarily think we just take it for granted on face value that that's what we believe. Like I'm very a big believer in like going back to that source text and figure out where do these ideas come from, where do we derive these notions.
yeah, I think that's good for scholarly purposes, but Hindu ideas are not of the same breath as saying just because something's old, it's good. Like the whole idea is you have new things coming all the time, like new siddhantas, new viewpoints, new mantras. Like how many, like if you look at most traditional groups, most people, like if you belong to a particular group, people probably chant Bajra Govindam more than they chant anything Rig Veda, right? So Bajra Govindam because it's connected to their lineage. Or you might chant, Kanakadara Stotram, or in Shiva Vaishnavas, you might do Sudarshana or whatever it is. That's connected more to your tradition and not necessarily connected to the age of what you're doing before,
Yeah.
right? So because knowledge is always growing, evolving, and we shouldn't let that and part of the problem is we can't view the past as being fixed in that sense, like the tradition being fixed. These are living, breathing, growing traditions that new ideas should come in. And part of the problem is I think a lot of people in Hindu thought right now are not doing more engagement with other traditions and other viewpoints, other knowledge systems to bring into bear. I think
Yeah.
there's too much of that, like, oh, we have to get our viewpoint, which you do, but grow it.
Yeah. I think that what you're saying is correct, finding new ways to innovate your understanding of the Vedic text. And I think even the texts themselves or the traditions themselves, yes, I agree in principle that age does not equal good. But I do think that these traditions do make it a point to demonstrate their eternality, and they
Right.
will find continuity with age, with the oldest text, and be like, "No, this was always being said." And you can make an argument. You can go back into the Vedas and be like, "Hey, this was always being said."
You can, yeah, but you also have to be very. I think sometimes people have to be very, maybe honest about this stuff too. You don't want to I don't want to pick on Christians and Muslims, but you don't want to always retroactively read back into your texts.
Okay.
To be clear, to say that that we know for sure. Let's say that the Pandavas exist in the Vedas. Well, no, we don't. They're not there. You should read it back. Or the concept of, let's say, the concept of bhakti is built into the Vedas. Well, I don't think it is. I think there's kernels, but I
Yeah.
think it's not like a bhakti as we understand bhakti today, right? So I think we have to be clear, but and be honest about what the Vedas are, what the Upanishads and the Mahabharata is. The Mahabharata clearly has this concept, right? It's really fleshed out there in the Gita and these various other Gitas too, right? The conversation about bhakti is very important.
Sure.
Yeah,
In many ways, I do see Mahabharata almost as like it's adjacent to the Vedas, but like from the Purana. It's like a bridge between the Vedas and the Puranas in many ways.
yeah. It's funny. I think there's this story. It's apocryphal. Maybe it's apocryphal. I don't know. But Veda Vyasa had to weigh his works, and he put the Mahabharata and Vedas together. Mahabharata won. Well, I don't know if it's because the size of the Mahabharata, right? Like being 100,000 verses. Like even if you put all the Vedas together, it's probably something close to maybe 30,000, 40,000 verses. It's much smaller than Mahabharata. Um, but actually, probably much smaller than that because Rig Veda is about 10,000 verses. Yajur Veda has some like 80% Rig Veda with like 20%. And Samaveda is Rig Veda, but like Sang, and then Atharvana has its own, so maybe much smaller. But yeah, but it's also to say that the Mahabharata, like I was saying earlier, even if you lost all the Vedas and lost the Puranas and lost most of our texts, if you have the Mahabharata, you pretty much have everything you
Not at
need.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, like the story of Rama is in there twice in the Mahabharata. That exists in the Mahabharata. It's told to the Yudhishthira, I think by the Rishi Domya in the Vanaparva, I think. But yeah, it's told. It's pretty. It's Mahabharata is. I mean, it's. I could understand why the German scholars in the 18th century were like, "This is a monstrosity," because it's such a huge. Like, unless you're willing to dive in deep and read and understand, it can be very difficult because it requires a level of, especially if you're not a super good scholar but you're a mediocre scholar. Mahabharata is not good for you. Mahabharata is really good for the people that don't care about scholarship but want storytelling, narrative, and emotion, and for really really good scholars. If you're not either of those, you kind of like you're
You
gonna
get
muddle around.
frustrated because you're not able to make sense of it.
Right, because you're not quite willing to be emotional about it, nor are you quite ready to like dive deep into the words, etymologies, relationships,
so
right?
That's really funny. But you got to keep that one. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
remember.
Well, how about this? The text you got to commit to some way.
Yeah. Either
You can't be lukewarm. You can't be lukewarm.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah. All right. So any questions, guys? I know there's like, almost 90 people on right now on various streams. It's not bad.
Do you have a chance if you want? And did you check out the Daniel Hikikachu and Arjun debate?
I did. Did you?
I haven't had a chance. No.
Yeah. Yeah, we could discuss that, but like, is that? I mean, we might do a response.
Yeah, we don't have to. I couldn't care less. So.
Yeah, we might do a response video to that at some point. Actually, Theology Unleashed wants to do one response because I think, I mean, he did okay, but the problem is just like, so sometimes you have to know the larger Hindu worldview to be able to engage with doing any sort of discussion or debate around textual sources and the larger tradition, because Arjuna Gallagher, who does Theology Unleashed. He's really great guy, but he's Gaudiya Vaishnava in a particular ISKCON worldview, which is they're focused really on the Bhagavatam and the Gita, right? Even the Mahabharata, they don't know very well. They know the Gita and the Bhagavatam. And in that, they're like limited in their understanding of how, and I'm only talking about like regular lay people. I'm not saying the scholars necessarily, maybe some of them do, but like how the textual hermeneutics work, and like what texts are important, what texts matter, what texts like for example, if you bring up Manusmriti, like Hakikachu does all the time, Manusmriti. Well, my question is, who's it authoritative to? It's a text. It sits there. People sometimes quote from it, but like, why is it authoritative? Why is it more authoritative than, let's say, the Mahabharata? Is it? No. Like, I think this is when it's like the problem is not understanding that there's a hierarchy of texts, and Manusmriti, the Dharmashastras are not higher than the Vedas, higher than the Itihasas, higher than the Puranas. They're considered lower in terms of their adhyatmic value or their moral teachings about things. Okay, so there's a question here. Let's see this. How useful is Mahabharata when thinking about modern day social justice? Oh, that's a good one, Steve. I appreciate it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And thinking about modern day social justice. I mean, there's so many. This answer, you could talk about this answer forever. how many different places do you want to go with this? What comes to mind are a couple different places. Obviously, with the end goal of the will to act, the will to put away personal attachments aside in order for the greater good. We talked about this yesterday, right? The stability of
Mhm.
the earth, right? And that is involved. Dharma is rooted in social justice, right? In the injustice of humanity and resolving that inequality or injustice that's taking place. Um, I also look at, is it the story of Dronacharya, Guru Dronacharya, when he was a, is it with, just correct me if I'm wrong with this, but he has a childhood friend and he meets with him, and when,
Yes, that is the story of Drona and Drupada, who becomes the
yeah,
father of Draupadi
yeah,
and the father-in-law of the Pandavas.
yeah, and he comes asking for help. He's obviously just comes from a poor background, and he pretends he doesn't even know him. He's like, "Who are you? Like, you're just a
Yeah,
poor beggar." Yeah, you see elements of kind of like, I mean, look, social justice is a very politically, I think, charged term now associated with left-wing movements. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. I think justice of a social sense can apply to anything.
yeah. I mean, I'll say so. Mahabharata is very, very deeply intertwined and concerned with justice. I mean, the very concept of why, for example, Bhishma gets killed the way he gets killed, or the Yudhishthira going to hell for lying, or the way that each of the Pandavas die as they walk up the mountain. Everything in the text is concerned with justice. By justice, meaning like there has to be a resolution to an action. Like nothing can just sit in limbo in that sense, right? So for example, if you're talking about like social justice in the sense of womanhood or talking about a gender or caste, right? Yeah. So that's very, very important to Mahabharata. Why is Karna upset about why he's not given what he?
Oh my
So
god.
sorry. Yeah. The Karna is concerned with why why he doesn't have what he has, but it's not caste's concern. That's not what his concern is. It's also he feels he deserves this, but although he is ridiculed by the Pandavas here and there for his varna, he isn't he isn't prevented from being a king. He isn't prevented from doing these things. There is bigotry and bias built into the Mahabharata according to a lot of characters. And that's part of human nature, right? So it's not trying to escape that. What it's trying to do a lot of times is try to reconcile this nature and relationship between um, justice, action, and practicality in some sense, right? So but here's a beautiful way the Mahabharata deals with gender in this sense, right? Like so, there in I think the Shanti Padma, there's a story of I think Bhishma tells Yudhishthira, if I'm not mistaken, about this um, female ascetic named Sodlaba. Sodlaba is this female ascetic that is trying to gain Brahmajnana or knowledge. So she's been traveling all around the world and trying to learn from people. And she hears about this king Janaka, who's considered to be this, Janaka, maybe the same Janaka in the Upanishads, the one who's enlightened the Raja Rishi. And she's like, okay, let me go meet this Janaka and see if I can, learn something from him. So she goes and she takes on a beautiful form. So because as rishis do, they're able to control their form and do those things.
Yeah.
So she goes there, yeah, and then she's having the conversation with him, and he is basically talking down to her for her womanness about like this stuff, and she was like, well, aren't you the man who's supposed to be able to see Brahman and see am I the body, am I my physicalness, is the womanness about me that's important, or is my atma important? So she goes into this conversation, and then in fact he he uh he thinks he's so much better than her, but she's able to read his mind, penetrate his mind, and like feel what he feels, and then he's at this point like exasperated, and she's just like, yeah, she said basically your fixation on these bodily things like your gender, the power dynamics, is a problem for your Brahmajnana, right? So I don't have much to learn from you. It moves on. So what I'm saying is, in that sense, the spiritual viewpoint of this masculine, feminine, these politics around human nature is seen as being less than, because the Brahmajnana, or the inner self, is more important. And if you want to focus and talk about the inner self and being spiritual that way, your fixation on the human aspect of your power, your sex, your gender, your race, your community is a problem. So in some sense, she's flipping it back on him. But so it's a great story. There's quite a few of stories that sit through the Mahabharata like that.
Yeah,
That
just
play.
challenging what was evident at the time to be like social orders at the time, just flipping things on their head, making you question current existing hierarchies that people would have been accustomed to at the time of reading it for millennia.
Right, and a lot of times they don't answer the questions.
Yeah.
They'll leave the quandary there, and leave it to us to pick up the thread.
And that's the best way to go about it. I'm glad it did that. I don't like the fact that I wouldn't want it to make a definitive statement on how one thing ought to be. Social dynamics are constantly changing, evolving. We live in a radically different society than the time of the Mahabharata. To do so would, and I think that's what makes it such a text that keeps up with the times, is its ability to by leaving the question out, it allows us to debate these questions for while society is changing and the economic dynamics are changing. To make hard, definitive statements about these things, it would date the text. It would make it, the dating of the text would be showing. So
Yeah, and look, like the social elements of human beings are always going to be present, right? This is part of the war. Is in some sense is when we're talking about caste or varna, whatever it is, it's built into that society at some level, right? You can't get around that truth. Is Arjuna's duty as a warrior is because he is a Kshatriya. Although the text, again, like I said earlier, actually puts that concept of Kshatriya to test, because he's not a pure Kshatriya. They're all mixed Kshatriyas. They're all descendants of mixed communities. After Parashurama has killed all of all the Kshatriyas on earth, the women run to the Brahmanas, Shudras, Vaishyas, and they get impregnated by them, and then that child is raised as Kshatriya. So the text itself is talking. Well, your senses of purity are also kind of problematic, right? Because who's writing this text? Vyasa. Vyasa is technically he's mixed, right? He's Brahmana with, although the father of Satyavati at the level of the story is a king, I think Gatasmada or something like that. But her father that everyone knows at that time is the fisherman, who doesn't probably belong to the Kshatriya class. So it's built into the story about how they're dealing with the social dynamics, the gender dynamics, the power dynamics, and even class dynamics, right? Or play too. It's not to say they're giving you answers and saying, you have to be a social justice warrior. It's not saying that, because its ultimate goal in the Mahabharata is somehow, some way, these things will keep arising, right? This is the point that the text is driving, is violence. These fights ultimately are not going to free you from any of it. It's the Atma going into, it's going to free you. Act and do those things, but do it from a different perspective.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It talks about how changes in society are always going to be driven by the clashes of tribes, tribal or ego, in a sense, the clashes of ego, identity, whether that is your kingdom identity, Kauravas and Pandavas, your tribal identity based on your Varna, um, based on your sides on two different issues. You'll see that clash is always taking place, and so I guess the text is asking you to reflect on these dynamics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I don't want to also belabor the point and say, we should be constantly reading in this stuff into everything. I think it should be dealt with, but it's not the crux of Mahabharata. Is not is the social justice in that sense. No.
yeah.
But thanks for the question, man. Okay, so I think we have some people talking to each other. Let me see here. Okay, Abhishek says, what I was talking about is authenticity, as many scholars mention there are falsehoods or later additions in Tatparya and Nirnaya. So how do you understand? I actually don't know if um, anything about the Advaitin position on the Tatparya and Nirnaya. So I can't really offer any good anything. I just read the text. I don't know anything more about its scholarly historical significance. Okay. We have Nicholas is okay, that's cool. Any other questions, guys, on this space? I mean, okay, here we go. Vague question, but answers like what should people understand about non-Upanishadic Veda? What do we need to know to understand it? Is our key ideas on modern relevance? Yeah, the non-Upanishad Veda, you're just talking really about I assume you're going to talk about the Mantra Samhita, which is really going to be like the mantras. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Uh, what do you need to know to understand it? What you need to know if you want to really understand it is Vedic Sanskrit. Vedic Sanskrit is going to help you really understand it. The key ideas in modern relevance. Yeah, that's where it gets difficult because most texts um, are narratives. So narratives give you context to think about and engage with uh, with with our condition and as human in modern age. But I guess in some sense, it's like me saying, if I play a song to you, is that song have relevance to the modern world? I don't know because this is poetry. This is mantras and exhortations to the gods and less so about a philosophy than it is about efficacious engagement. Now there are people that will enter into the text and give sophisticated theologies or ideas around the Rig Veda mantra samhita, but I don't know enough about that to be really um, uh, cognizant. I mean cogent about saying anything more than that. And then what do we have here? Naveen says, please read Light on the Vedas by R.L. Kashyap and Secret of the Vedas by Sri Aurobindo. Okay. The philosophical relevance. Is this about the particular mantra samhita, Naveen, or is this about the Vedas on the whole, in which he includes the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads? Let me know.
It'd be really cool if we had those PDFs. I think it'd be good content if we kind of read through, just specific passages of these books written by like 21st century or 20th century books about the Vedas. See like those kind of 20th century reflections on it.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I don't know how people will be interested in that, but I will definitely give it a shot. If you want to find a book, we can
Just
maybe.
passages, not entire books, but just
Yeah. But we have to do the work beforehand and make sure
sure. Yeah,
Yeah. We could do that. Definitely do that. I'm down with that. Yeah, R.L. Kashyap is cool. I like some of his work. Aurobindo obviously is well known. I've read some of Aurobindo's, not too much. So I don't. I'm not. I couldn't really give any competent views on Aurobindo. So I will avoid those. but I can give competent views on the Mahabharata. So, are there particular, so to the audience, are there particular stories or questions or comments that you guys want me to address about the Mahabharata, or even maybe even the Ramayana in that sense, or let's say this white person Ramayana, Mahabharata. Mahabharata sounds like a burrata, right? Like having the cheese, the
Oh
great
yeah.
cheese.
Did you order the Mahabharata?
Mahabharata pizza.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, so if you guys listen and you want to throw me a line, ask me questions, or comments, we can take. This is the first one. I spent a good like hour like just talking to the screen, and that's kind of weird. It felt kind of weird to me. I'm just not
Yeah,
used
yeah.
to.
That's fun. That's what I used to do on TikTok. Just talk to the screen for an hour about just random questions. But yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes I feel like I should put more notes together and talking points, but I don't know. I kind
I
of
don't know. I
go.
think sometimes just letting it flow is also good. I mean, you're talking to the audience. The audience understands you. Like you're
Yeah,
interacting. So
yeah. Okay, so here's the question: which do I prefer? Or mine or Mahabharata? Oh man.
I can I answer this one first. I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
say
go ahead.
it is what it is. I think I had a whole obsession with Ramayana, and I think it's a lot easier to break down. It's a lot shorter. So preferences, I think, I don't want to say prefer, but I think Ramayana is a lot more accessible to the average person. I think a little more so than Mahabharata. Everything is a little more bite sized. It's Mahabharata for beginners, I think, in a sense. Like if you can understand, if you get used to breaking down Ramayana a little bit, then I think it can help you get into the complex world of Mahabharata. I that would be my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, as a story, I mean, they're both awesome stories. And it's tough to choose. Mahabharata just has a. So here's but this is like the cheat answer because it gets me out. I like the Mahabharata more because it has the Ramayana in it. So
Maybe,
like,
maybe.
it doesn't have the necessarily the Valmiki Ramayana exactly the way Valmiki wrote it with his flourishes and his poetry, but the Ramayana is in the Mahabharata. So I guess in that sense, like Mahabharata, right? It has both. Um, but as a story, so in the Mahabharata, the story of Rama is told to Yudhishthira because Yudhishthira is whining and crying about the fact he's like the worst. He's had the worst situation in the world, and he's been exiled, and then so he get told the story of two kings that get exiled. One is Nala Damayanti in that story, and then the other story is Rama. So yeah, it's there. Okay, so let's try this one. When Arjuna asked Krishna to stop raising arms against Bhishma, did that indirectly indicate he didn't fully surrender to Krishna and the Gita? So I think people take the position. This is where it's like this idea. It's difficult because it's not as if you surrender. You just give up your will, give up your inherent nature. You're always going to be who you are. So the idea of Sharanagati is that you have taken the ritual and given it up, and you're going to take efforts to be better and work towards it. Oh, and you're still going to fail. So, but that bhara, that burden, is taken by God. In this, it's a similar way, I think, to Christians view the sense of believing in. If you take Jesus, accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, He will free you from all sins and take you to heaven, kind of thing. But it's a little different in that sense, in the sense of there's way more push within the traditions that you still have to act karmically or dharmically, try to give up certain acts and processes, especially when you do the formalized process of something within the true Vaishnava tradition as Bharanyasam or the other one. Yeah. Okay. So next question. Unless do you have a response to that, Sammy?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember this very specifics. I know Bhishma does something that Krishna sees as dharmic and kind of.
So yeah, in the war, I mean, I could find that picture. It's actually a fantastic picture. I actually want to
Is it
put it
the
up
one where
here.
he's like grabbing onto Krishna and he's like holding this?
Yeah, yeah. hold on. I want to put that picture here. This is it. This is the bomb diggity. I like this. Hold on. I'll throw it up.
For a text that never was originally in image form, they have a lot of iconic sceneries. And
oh well, this is also because of the awesomeness of the ISKCON community for doing this, right? They got really great artists to sit down and get all this done. Oh, I have it here. There we go. Let's make that the center. So this scene, and let's just remove ourselves from the picture. Just no, not that. Just there we go. So if you look at that, so this is the scene. What occurs is, so the guy in the white is Bhishma. Krishna is with the chariot wheel, and then Arjuna is grabbing onto him. So in this particular scene, Arjuna has previously, in the beginning of the war, promised to fight, right, and to kill his uncle or whatever, or his grandfather here. And so when he goes to fight him, Arjuna is like being lackadaisical about it. He's not. He's like he's kind of just like play fighting him. Yes, they're shooting arrows, but he's not actually putting his effort in. And then Krishna is just like so. And Bhishma is like goading on Arjuna and Krishna. So he actually like shoots Krishna. And Krishna he's like, "Are you not going to fight? Are you not going to man up and do this?" And Arjuna is like, Krishna says, "You know what? Like now I'm going to take up arms and fight you." And earlier, Bhishma had Krishna made a vow that he was going to not take up arms at all in this war.
Yeah.
Bhishma made the vow that he's going to make Krishna take up arms in this war. And so part of that is Krishna found a way to violate his vow for his devotee. So part of this is a way of describing the nature that God's willing to break his own rules for the love of his devotees.
Wow.
So yeah. Okay. So does the Mahabharata talk about the characteristics of Arya versus Mlecha? So yeah and no, because for example, Yudhishthira and Vidura in the Adiparva in the Lakshagraha, the house of lack, they speak to each other in Mlecha Bhasha, or the language of the Mlechas. So they have to have some way of knowing it, and they studied it, and why is a whole other thing. But the idea is they spoke in this language because no one else knew it, and they can plan around it. So they lived there for a year, but they had to plan to build a tunnel underneath the house to escape before the burning. So there is some mention of Mlechas, people like Hunas and Chinnas and the Bahaklikas and these other people. But a lot of these people come and fight in the war themselves, but there's not this like overall disdain for Mlechas. It's just like, when Karna talks crap on Shalya, his charioteer, he talks crap as to the region of Madra, and he calls them Mlechas because even though they have some Arya practice, not fully Arya the way the Kurus are. So he attacks them for allowing their women to go freely around and frolic and choose their own husbands and all that stuff. Well, the Kurus are much more conservative. So it's interesting, yeah. Okay. What do you think is the most common academic misunderstanding about the Mahabharata? Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know I don't know if there's good scholars don't have too many misunderstandings of Mahabharata. They have perspectives, and I think the good scholars would be people like John Brockton. Even though I might disagree with him, he's a great scholar. Jerry Larson. Who else is there? Goldman's are good scholars. I don't agree with a lot of stuff they say, but they're really good scholars. Um, I am hesitant for when people read. So one misunderstanding I think is reading cast into the Mahabharata from modern lenses. I think that's a problem. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I would say, to your point, the biggest misconception or biggest issue is when you can have a perspective. I think there are multiple perspectives, and holding your perspective to be the perspective or the foundational interpretive perspective of the text itself. When you start holding views like that, is then when I think scholarship is turns into dishonesty a little bit, or maybe it's a misconception. Maybe it's a pitfall that some people studying the text will go into, is that they'll look at it a certain way, they'll interpret a certain way, and say that this is the one and only interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, what we have here, Rahul says, Mukund, please recommend a good translation of Mahabharata.
Raj Gopalachari, what do you think?
No, that's the bridge. It's a bridge version. I 1,000% would say uh, we Vivek Du Bois is one of the best for modern readers. Absolutely.
Do you want to? Can I
Yeah.
type that out for the chat for anyone who?
Yeah, Vivek Du Bois Mahabharata. And okay, so Abhishek read Bori. If one could send, Ami Ganathara's book is actually pretty good. And she's not translating it, but she's dealing with her two books are three books: Mahabharata Unraveled Part 1 and Part 2, and then Ramayana Unraveled Part 1. Or there's only one part. I had her on the podcast a long time ago. You should read that book. It's really cool. It gets there's another good book by Guru Charan Das. If you haven't read him, it's the difficulty of being good, and it goes through the Mahabharata and its various characters. And then there's also another book by, I guess, Badrinath Chaturvedi. I forget the name of the book. I have it somewhere. On the Mahabharata. It's a really good book too. And anything by Alf Hittelbeidel is fantastic. It's again not commentary. It's not translations, but they're really deep engagements with the text. I think it's like one is called The Education of a Dharma King, Draupadi in the Mahabharata. There's books on Arjuna and Mahabharata. It's really cool stuff. Okay, all the art you are, yes, that's correct, Vishal. All the art you are seeing is painted by ISKCON devotees, correct. And they're beautiful, wonderful paintings. And it's actually, most of this is by like one Italian guy. I think this is Italian style.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
As someone who I've heard you vocalize your opinion about this, what do you make of the way Karna was sort of recharacterized in modern Mahabharata depictions versus how he's presented in the original source text?
Yeah. I mean, so Karna is interesting. I mean, he is a tragic character, but some of the tragedy is also of his own making, and his own failings. He is a good warrior, but he's also one that is haughty, right? Like, so a lot of people, if you want to compare the Iliad and the Odyssey to Mahabharata, Karna is like Achilles. He has this pride, this rage that just is overwhelming his view on everything, and I think he's modern day. He's depicted like some sort of oppressed man who rose up, and despite all the bigotry against him, but like he was trained by he was trained by Drona. Like it wasn't as if like he had to magically learn on his own. He was trained by Drona. He studied with the Kuru princes. And the time that he showed up, where where the scene where they first meet, or in almost all his Mahabharatas, and whether it's in the movies or the TV shows, is that particular exhibition was only for the Kurus. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It was the Kurus to show their elders that what they learned in Gurukula. So Karna is just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to show up here and show you guys what I can do too, because I'm that. You're like, all right. I mean, he's like kind of uninvited coming in, but he's also running. He ran away a lot of times in the war, or throughout the text from Arjuna. He ran away from the Gandharvas. He lied to Parashurama in order to gain the Brahmastra, and so he is. When you read the Sabha Parva, he is the one that is insulting Draupadi all over the place, trying to disrobe her, calling her a harlot, and all that. He's constantly trying to get the Kauravas, even more so than Shakuni, by the way. Shakuni many times tells Duryodhana, "I think you got to stop this and reconcile." Karna's like, "Ah, f this, screw them all. We'll do whatever." So Karna is not the nicest guy, but he does have good qualities. He is giving. He's charitable. That's very, very, very clear through the text. Even giving the charity of his armor to Indra, was very charitable. I mean, he did a transaction for sure. He got the Shakti, right, the weapon of Indra that could kill any target that once it's thrown, which he was trying to save for Arjuna, but um, Krishna's machinations forced him to use it against Ganodrata instead of Arjuna. Yeah, so it's I think Karna is portrayed too much to be like some sort of anti-hero when he's pretty much a bad guy. Okay. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha are all important in Hinduism, but it seems like many Vaishnavite and other Hindu sects skip over Artha, Kama, and practice and focus on Moksha. I think you're right.
This
I
is
think you're
a
right.
very, very good comment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think there's a hyperfixation on moksha, as and yeah, go ahead.
I mean, sorry, I know. You can go, but that has to be shamanic influence that has allowed that to happen.
I don't know. I don't know. I think the Vedanta influences that. All right. I think this idea of somehow, Vedanta is about a particular means of getting you out of the world and moksha, mukti, nirvana, whatnot. But yeah, I think there's not enough engagement with artha and kama, um, and then how dharma means in those worlds. Like I think in some sense, we have adopted many liberal and Western ideas, which is, I mean, not saying it's not good or bad, but like, what does Dharma have to say about that? Is there a better way? Is there a better moral framework? I mean, those are the questions I would ask, and I think we should talk about Artha and Kama, like what is acceptable means of earning wealth, and what are our duties with wealth, and like pleasure, like should we, well, things like premarital sex or dating or what aspect of our Hindu world is dealing with those important ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else. We got some more. Okay, here we go. Prem, what is your initial reaction when you learned what happened to Draupadi and how Krishna protected her? What was my initial reaction? It's interesting because again, this is where it's like scholarly side is that there are many manuscripts where Krishna doesn't protect her. It's Dharma that protects her. In fact, she reaches out and Dharma comes and protects her, and not Krishna, because Krishna at this time is fighting Salva in Dwarka when this occurs. And he talks about this actually because when he meets them in the forest after they've been exiled, he rushes back to the forest and meets them and says, "Oh, if I had known, I would have rushed to you and protected you in the Sabha, destroyed all the Kauravas there, but I was fighting, Shalva in Dwarka." So there is a sense that there might be some discrepancy on this in the textual tradition about whether or not it was Krishna that did it or Dharma that did it, but maybe it doesn't matter. Yato Krishna tato Dharma, right? Yato Dharmo tato Jaya. So this idea that Krishna is Dharma in some sense is, maybe that's just all what it's saying is everything functions that way, but it's a good point. Gita Press critical. So those are questions. Do you think Sanskrit has a unique, almost magical and ineffable nature to it? If you so, could you breed a sense of superiority amongst Hindus? Well, I think every language has something unique, magical, and ineffable to it. And no language is alike. They're all different. They rose and grew in a milieu that made sense for them and their people. They developed beautiful literature and art and music in that language. Um, so, do I think it's magical? Yeah, I would say I have a little more uh, love for Sanskrit in my heart than maybe other languages. But I also think it's very interesting and fun and complex, and you could do a lot of cool things with it. And maybe I do think at some level it can reflect better the the ideas of the gods and dharma and things like that. What are your thoughts, say?
Yeah, I agree. I do think it has a magical nature to it. It does. It really does. You can ask. I think. I mean, take it for what it's worth. You can ask not non-Indians about listening to mantras and the experience of it. I mean, just as simple as like even the Hare Krishna movement, right? Just hearing Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Krishna Krishna Rama. Just that alone has captured the hearts of so many non-Indians. Just it's the Shabad, right? Alone. Anyways, in terms of it, the second aspect of it, superiority. I mean, I think our philosophy has a magical nature to it too. I think Advaita Vedanta has a magical nature to it. It's so profound. Does that create a sense of superiority? Sure. I mean, in the sense that, do I think this is true and I think it's beautiful? I think that's just, I think the Sanskrit aspect isn't necessarily unique in terms of all the things that make the Vedic tradition amazing, beautiful, worth studying, worth following. I think that's just one element of it. And, if I think my religion is true, then um, you have to be able to pursue that truth without putting your ego into it. And that's the game of life is following your religion with sincerity without supremacy, in a sense.
Yeah, and that's a tough needle to thread, right?
Yeah.
It's a our egos are necessary for us to function in the world, to have a desire for greatness and achievement, but at the same time they're bog us down in our own negativity and our own fixations. So yeah, and so I think anyone the sense of superiority is a problem, and in fact, a lot of the sense of superiority a lot of times comes from people that don't know enough, but they'll these are the kind of people, but the Vedas say, and they've never read the Veda, and or they'll have all these the golden age of India, we was perfect in all times, and you're like, well, no, it's people that don't understand or don't spend the time that will have an air of superiority around them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what this offensive arc. Is Shishupala depicted pretty much as clear antagonist in the source text, or more ambiguously? He's kind of a non-player. I mean, frankly, he just shows up. He shows up in a couple places, but I mean, it's not Krishna's not worried about the dude. Shishupala, he's shows up because he's promised Rukmini, and he doesn't get her, so Krishna gets her, and whatever. And then he shows up in a couple other places, and then and finally in Sabhapadma, where he's killed by Krishna. Yeah, he's shown as a bad guy, not a good guy, but he's not like no one's really scared of the dude except for you know. So it's not like that. Yeah. So Arjuna says, "Thanks. My comment was inspired by side effects of it." Yeah, I think that's fair. Shame about normal from shame about normal desires to escapism from that material reality. Yeah, I think there's this fixation. I think sometimes on like um, I don't know if it's all Victorian morality that's playing here. If we can merely lay it at the feet of that, and probably not. I think of course, there's a conservative uh, uh, flow within Hinduism too, and amongst Hindu groups. But yeah, I mean, I do think there's too much fixation on this sense of moksha and purity that sometimes I think needs to be rejiggered with. Any thoughts on that, Sammy, or you good?
No, I just think with the that story, but um um yeah, no, let's keep it going.
All right. Is it okay? Is it moksha fixation more of a modern thing as a response to Western religions being ideology's final goals? Now, Hinduism is the product moksha, but it gives you like a car commercial. Interesting. You want to respond to that, man?
It might be. That's a really hard question to answer. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We have text about moksha and how you go about it. Even the Gita talks about attaining heavenly abodes, right? And that's more of a swarga and what it takes to achieve liberation. But perhaps you're right. I don't know. Is it different than doing your dharma without attachment? If doing your dharma, no matter how material involved your dharma is, if you do it without attachment, is that a path to moksha? And is that what you get the final goal? That's one element of it. I don't know. This is I'm like maybe I'm overthinking the question a little bit, but um I would say that the fixation, not the fixation, but the goal has always been to do your duty without attachment. Does that lead to moksha? I think some texts would argue that it does, but um, I think it's also important that when we're doing our duties, we're not thinking about we're doing it for the sole purpose of attaining a liberated afterlife. So that's kind of the way to break it down.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How did Bhishma know Krishna's divinity? A couple of reasons is I think first of all, Bhishma himself was the son of Ganga, right? And he had spent time in um, Swarga, where he was trained by Parashurama, by the Devas, by Brihaspati. So I think there's an element of him being more deeply connected spiritually to that realm that allowed him to know Krishna's divinity. Um, yeah, that's the answer I would give. I don't think the text gives you a reason. There's nothing there that says, well, because Bhishma was, you know, XYZ, he knew Krishna's divinity. No, it's just like through the text you learn that Bhishma knows his divinity, and he's constantly saying like, or the other, you know who you're talking to, and you know, yeah, okay, all right. I mean, I could keep going, but if that depends on people having questions and bringing them up. We've hit like 2 hours. So what do you guys feel? If you have questions, pop it up. I can stick around for another few minutes and spend some time. Or we can close up shop. Or you guys, tell me what you guys want. All right, Sammy, what are you up to today? Rest of the day.
Nothing much. Probably gonna. I actually want to read some text. Maybe I'm gonna talk about the UCLA controversy.
Well,
Uh,
yeah. Sorry, what's the UCLA controversy?
the Hindu heritage.
The
Um,
UC Berkeley, you mean?
oh,
Berkeley.
UC Berkeley. I'm sorry. Yeah, UC
Yeah,
Berkeley.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna talk about the UC Berkeley controversy. And we'll probably. I'm working with. Do you know Samir Rao on Instagram by any chance? He's up and coming content creator. Someone that you should have
No,
on the Meru Media podcast. If you, I'll give you. I'll send you
no.
his thing. He's man. This guy's fantastic. He's everything I've wanted to be as a content creator.
What does he do?
He talks about like he kind of talks about everything. He talks about like just different experiences he's had in India. He lives in India. He's from India. He'll talk about the political stuff, whether it's relevant, India, Pakistan, all that stuff. But he also talked about how he went to Kedarnath and he heard Tamil poems being sung in Kedarnath, and
Oh,
you'll
wow.
see this. And so he's there, and so he's filming it, and so he's just showing like how India is not isolated civilizations, but like a unified thread. And you can see these interweavings in places like Kedarnath, where they're doing all of our poems were being played, or sorry,
Is
Nayanar
he
poems were
is
being
he in
played.
India or is he based here?
He's based in India. He's based in India. I
Okay.
think he's Canada, I believe.
Looking at some
Here, let me find
around.
his Instagram page.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. So he actually wants to collab with me on a reel today. Samir Prashant Rao.
Let me see. Does he spell it with the I or E?
I know Samer, two E's.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, good stuff. It's got some good following.
Yeah, he just kind of just blew up on the algorithms.
Okay. All right, here's a question for you, Sammy. I don't know. It's for you.
I mean, do you agree with that other American minorities are under the gun more than in um I don't know. Under the gun. I would say that it's harder for us. I don't think we're I think we have the illusion of being under a gun. I think it's way. I do think it's much worse for India. I don't know. This is a highly political question. Do you want me to get into this? Are you okay with that, Mukunda? Is your
Do
permission?
it. Do it.
Yeah, so I would just say that we have freedom of speech a lot more in America. I think that if you feel like you can't say what you need to say about certain things about India, then you don't have the right opinion. But I would say that we have the freedom of it. I think there's an illusion. I think there's a misconceived belief that we have to be careful with how we talk about India. I don't want to get too political, and I think that's just a hump we have to get over in terms of talking about what goes on in the motherland and being able to have open dialogue and discourse. It really once you have it, and we've been able to do it. Stevie, you've been part of those. We actually have really, really incredible discourse, and so uh, I mean, I feel like we are targeted, sure, but I think I would be far more limited in what you're able to do or say if I was living in India. I think that there's a serious targeting there, and you have like caste politics there in India too, with the census. There's a specific targeting there. Yeah, we are targeted here, but it's easily overcome as long as we develop some consciousness and discourse.
Yeah. Well, good response. Okay. See, next one. What theories of Krishna's story being an amalgamation of different heroes come from? Where does the theory? Um, yeah, I mean, so this is where I think it comes from some scholar's head. I don't think there's a lot of evidence um, to indicate that. I mean, look, I mean, there is like Jan Gonda, who's I think a brilliant scholar. He passed away years ago. He wrote a book on Vaishnavism, and he talks about Krishna as being this. He talks about this. First of all, like there's a connection he's got to make between Vishnu and Narayana, and then that those two connections lead to Krishna. So I think, yeah, I think a large part of this idea that Krishna being different heroes, amalgamation of different heroes. I don't know there's any evidence for that. It seems to be mostly conjecture. Um, so yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Unless you have something to say, Sammy.
I would say that it's probably a projection from how other myths have been developed in other parts of the world, and it's just an assumption. Oh, okay, well, it happened in the Near East, or it happened in the the Middle East, or it happened in Africa, and if we can see it happening there, then it probably happened in India. And they come up with the conclusion first before finding the evidence for it. I think is the approach that scholars take. Which I don't know. Can't blame them necessarily, but you can't just yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's if you give me evidence, I don't have a problem believing that's the case, but if there's evidence, I would, but there's nothing. It's just pure conjecture. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, what would basic Hindu meditation be? One size fits all kind of thing. Maybe not deity specific. Japa seems like it encourages escapism from silent falling reality in front of you. I don't think there is a basic a Hindu meditation. I think that is going to be dependent upon which guru or acharya gives you. that meditation practice. So no, there's definitely not one size fits all. I've never met uh, a, a legit guru that gives the same mantra the same way, same uh, dosage that they would to any one person.
Sure. I mean, that's why I think consulting Art of Living is really good. They really do try to personalize meditation for you, and I think it's very positive. My experiences with Art of Living. I
Yeah,
mean, if I were to, I guess if you're just looking for something to do, I think pranayama. I think basic pranayama. I think anyone can do. I don't know. I'm not the expert, so I'm not sure if there are unintended effects, but I do
yeah.
pranayama if I don't know what to do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Indian Hindu Americans are an odd place because many of us came as educated professionals. This is why cry bully tactics are other groups used to get their way don't work when Indian Hindus do it. Oh, I see what you're saying.
I
Okay.
don't think this is. I think this is some oversimplification. Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Go
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, that's not the reason. This is you're just causation equals correlation. That's not necessarily true. Yeah, but I think the reasons why what you're saying is the double standards. I think was what you're alluding to. They exist because of there's certain mechanisms in place that are intending for double standards to exist. I don't think it has to do with something not working, but when we cry on the internet, no one sympathizes with us. It's far more complicated than that. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. All right. Next one makes sense. Do you have a perspective on V.S. Naipaul and his critique of karma's effect on compassion? Frankly, I haven't read too much of Naipaul, so I don't know uh, his view on karma and compassion. Do you say?
Um, I don't, but I mean, if it's a critique of karma's effect on compassion, is he saying that chalking up people's misfortunes to karma would reduce one's compassion? Then he's never known the Tamil and Telugu language. What do we say when something bad has happened to somebody? Pavam, papam, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
If I think they're asking us, does that karma have an effect on that? So that's what I would say. I don't think that's true.
Yeah. So Srijun Agala says if you're a Shaivite, you may chant the Panchakshara. You don't need Adhikar to do its japa, as Lord Shiva has unlocked it for every Hindu, for everyone through his grace. Okay. So go for it. I have no problem with that. I mean, there's many different mantras you can chant. I just didn't. Yeah, that makes sense. Why is there no Indian head of Indic studies in Western universities? There are Indian professors for sure. I'm sure there's Indian head some. I would well actually let's put Vasudha Narayan was the head of the American Religious Symposium or something like that. I don't know, but I mean, I don't think the issue has been like the Indians being heads of departments or whatever isn't like a big issue. I think the issue has risen is that do we have many practitioner scholars or that are given the same space that other people are? And I think maybe there's not that many of them. And I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Um, yeah, I mean there are some, but why? I don't know. I'm trying to rewrite this question. I mean, the question's premise is wrong, so I'm trying to reframe this question to something I can work with. But why they're less as much as we want to, and I just think that there aren't Indians don't push their children to go into academia like this. Most of us do
Well,
STEM.
not
Is
in
that
yeah, not in uh humanities and like social sciences.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I think then when there's a lack, I think there's a lack of people who are of just presence of Indian presence in those spaces, not because of gatekeeping. Maybe
Yeah.
some. I think there's some element of it, but I think just there's not that many. I think if Indian parents let their children go into academia in these places, then it'd be different.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. What do you think, Sammy? Should we take a couple more, or should we? I mean, I don't know if there's any more, but do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, we can wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Anything else, guys? Listening, YouTube on X. You want to drop me a line, or I on this system you can't actually message from X onto this. You have to do it from from LinkedIn. YouTube. I think you only get YouTube chats here. You don't get the Facebook comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question here? I'm not an expert either. That could be oversimplifying, but he attacks arcade Naren's Mr. Sumpit as ignoring the suffering of others. Oh, I don't know about either of this stuff. Okay, he's providing some stuff. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of understanding what's being said. I feel like the focus on many of the Shastras and even Buddhism and Jainism is on compassion.
Yeah.
And on compassion for others for their suffering and how we can alleviate their suffering. So I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like maybe what's happening is Nepal's conflating, trying to give a reason as to why modern India is the way it is, by looking into the past to find a theory that might justify it. And maybe he sees karma doing it, and that's why he calls it that. A lot of people think of karma as fatalism, and I'm like, well, it's actually probably the opposite for most people. Yeah,
Absolutely, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
I don't know. I would just point to India's historical culture of giving, charities, service, seva, like all of that is. You cannot say that any of that can exist in a world where they're affirming karma, unless if you hold a fatalistic notion of karma.
Yeah, that's right. All right. I think we're done so here, right? I think that's all the questions. All right, everybody. Thank you all for your time. If you want to drop me a line, drop Sammy a line, please do. Let me know what we should do for our next live streams or whatnot. Yeah, guys, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your time. Jai Shri Rama, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Mata Di.
Guys, take care.
पुष्प सुगंध सुमलय समीरे पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे गायती वनमाली गायती वनमाली मधुरं गायती वनमाली